Genesis chapter 34. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humbled her. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the maiden and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this maiden for my wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with his cattle in the field. So Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. The sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard of it, and the men were indignant and very angry because he had wrought folly in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. For such a thing ought not to be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. I beg you, give her to him in marriage. Make marriages with us, give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it, and get property in it." Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask of me ever so much as marriage present and gift, and I will give according as you say to me. Only give me the maiden to be my wife." So the sons of the trickster answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully, because he had defiled their sister Dinah. They said to him, "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us." So Jacob his name has been changed to Israel, but what are his kids doing? They're going to go trip up Shechem and his household, and so they're identified here as the son of the tripper, as opposed to the sons of Israel. Verse 15, "Only this condition will we consent to you, that you will become as we are, and every male of you be circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone." Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem. And the young man did not delay to do the thing, because he had delight in Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all his family. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city, saying, "These men are friendly with us. Let them dwell on the land and trade in it, for behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters in marriage, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men agree to dwell with us, to become one people, that every male among us be circumcised as they are circumcised. Will not their cattle, their property, and all their beasts be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will dwell with us." And all who went out of the gate of the city hearkened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of his city. On the third day, when they were still sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi. Note that this is Simeon and Levi's little side quest adventure. Dinah's brothers took their swords and came upon the city unawares and killed all the males. So make another star or symbol here, especially connecting it to Simeon and Levi's names. This is the reason for their blessing that they're going to get at the end of the book of Genesis. And it's actually going to be more so they're actually going to get a curse from the dead, more so than a blessing. And you can make a note to chapter 49, verse 5. Chapter 49, verse 5. Verse 26, "They slew Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. And the sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because their sister had been defiled. They took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field." So yes.
They committed the first massacre.
I don't know if we'd say this is the first massacre in human history, but yeah, they went in, They basically handicapped all the fighting men in the village, and then while they're still recovering from their operation, they go in and get an easy victory over them.
No,
Yes.
It says they killed them all. It doesn't say they handicapped them.
Well, I was referring to their being circumcised and they're still recovering from the operation. Yes, ma'am. Okay. All their wealth, all their little ones and their wives, and all that was in the houses, they captured and made their prey. Verse 30, then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, underline this is Jacob's upset reaction to them. You have brought trouble on me by making me odious to the inhabitants of the land. The Canaanites and the Perizzites, my numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me, attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. So Jacob is not happy with them for doing this, right? They did this to defend their sister's honor. Jacob was trying to go about normalizing the situation in a more peaceful manner. And now Jacob's concern is that everyone knows that you guys just went and slaughtered the city. No one is going to trust us. They might even come out and try to destroy us because we're seen as untrustworthy. But his sons replied, should he treat our sister as a harlot? Chapter 35. God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make there an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you, and purify yourselves, and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, that I may make there an altar to the God who answered me in the day of my distress, and has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods that they had, and the rings that were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was near Shechem. So you get this call to monotheism. I thought everyone was already kind of monotheist, like this is the covenantal family. What's going on here? Well, we know that Rachel stole her household gods. Okay, so clearly there's some not a true commit to monotheism on her part. It's probably the same case with other people, the household. And then in the taking over of Hamor and Shechem city, it does say that they took all the inhabitants of that city. Now they're part of the household of Israel, so there's a need for another purgation from polytheism. All right, but this is also something that's going to be just constantly happening to the nation of Israel as a whole. They're going to be constantly be reminded to put away all the foreign gods among them and to get rid of them. Let's jump ahead to verse 16. Then they journeyed from Bethel, and when they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel went into labor. Just make a note, Ephrath is the city of Bethlehem. Rachel went to labor, and she had hard labor. And she was in her hard labor. The midwife said to her, fear not, for now you will have another son. And as her son was departing, for she died, as her soul was departing, for she died, she called his name Benoni, but his father called his name Benjamin. So Benoni means son of sorrow. And Benjamin means son of my right hand. Yeah.
Where did you say Ephrath is?
Ephrath is Bethlehem. It's another name for the city of Bethlehem. So Rachel dies in childbirth near Bethlehem. And what's significant about this is it comes into play in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah makes a reference to Rachel weeping for her children, which is then a prophecy about the death of the holy innocents that's going to happen under Herod's reign, and when Jesus and the Holy Family have to flee Bethlehem because of Herod. So Rachel wants to name the kid son of my sorrow because she's dying, and Jacob is like, forget that. I'm not naming that kid son of sorrow. Maybe a better name, son of my right hand. Verse 19. So Rachel died, and she was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. And Jacob set up a pillar upon her grave. It is the pillar of Rachel's tomb, which is there to this day. Israel journeyed on and pitched his tent beyond the Tower of Eder. Okay, so make a I would make a note here. Rachel is buried near Bethlehem at the Pillar of Rachel. If you remember, Abraham initially bought a plot of land from the Hittites. And I told you that was the tomb of the patriarchs. So Abraham's buried there, Sarah's buried there, Isaac and Rebekah are buried there. Jacob and Leah will be buried there, but Rachel is not buried in the tomb of the patriarchs. And the reason for that is because Rachel is the second wife. God does not approve of polygamy through the story of Jacob. All right, God does not approve of deceiving your father through the story of Jacob and Isaac and Esau. All right, polygamy always leads to internal strife amongst the family. And what have we read in this whole dynamic going on in Jacob's house is that there's a constant war between Rachel and Leah, a comparison game of who's having more kids, and then they're handing over their concubines to try to get more kids. It doesn't lead to a functioning family. And we've already seen a couple of flaws in some of the sons of Jacob, and there's going to be another one we're about to read about. But so in like the sacredness of marriage, one man, one wife, Leah as the first wife is the one who the covenant promise is going to pass through on to her children, not Rachel, even though Jacob prefers Rachel. Yes?
What is it called? The
Tomb of the Patriarchs. It's a cave that Abraham purchased. Yes?
So how come, like, the covenant passes through to Leah's children, but they're the ones that sell Joseph into slavery? Like, they're the bad ones in that story.
Sure.
But why?
You'll find out at the end of Genesis.
I know.
Look, one of the last lines of Genesis explains everything in the book, everything you know about salvation history. Okay.
Is it because of Judas? Like, how he handles the Benjamin situation in Egypt?
Judah does have a redemption.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then he is blessed for that by his son, father Jacob.
Yep. Yep.
That is awesome.
Sure. All right. Verse 22. Make another note. We get another blessing being effected in Genesis 49, verse 4. While Israel dwelt in the land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel found out. So Reuben, Leah has 4 sons initially, the 4 eldest sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Simeon and Levi just got onto Israel's naughty list because they went and just butchered a whole town. And now Reuben just made it onto that list because he slept with the dad's concubine. So they're both going to get nixed from the will, so to speak. Not fully, but it's going to impact their blessing, which means that the next eldest son of Leah, the next eldest boy in the whole family, is Judah. And Judah then is going to be the one who inherits the covenantal blessing. And from Judah, you get King David and eventually Jesus. Now, the sons of Jacob were 12, verse 23. The sons of Leah: Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, the guy who just messed up. Simeon, messed up. Levi, messed up. Judah, he has an okay record so far. Issachar and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel: Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maid, Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Zilpah, Leah's maid, Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. And Jacob came to his father Isaac at Marm, or Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac breathed his last, and he died, and he was gathered to his people, old and full of days. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. Chapter 36, we now go through the descendants of Esau. They become chiefs and kings of Edom. I want to jump ahead to 36, verse 31. These are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any kings reigned over the land of Israel. So that bit of information is going to help us historically place when the book of Job takes place. Bela, the son of Beor, reigned in Edom. the name of his city being Dinhabah. Bela died, and Jobab, the son of Zerah of Bozrah, reigned in his stead. Highlight Jobab. So a lot of the church fathers and the commentary on scripture, they believe this is a reference to Job from the book of Job. He's called Job Ab because he's being called here Father Job. Abba is Hebrew for father, and just like El can be an abbreviation for Elohim, Ab would be an abbreviation for father. So Jobab is referring to Father Job of the book of Job. So Job is a descendant of Esau, and his story takes place before the reign of the kings in Israel. 34. Jobab died, and Husham of the land of the Temanites reigned in his stead. You can also make a note of the Temanites. One of Job's friends, one of his 3 friends that show up to criticize him, he's a Temanite. So all the little bits and pieces here are pointing to that this is the same Job from the other book in the Old Testament. All right, the Esau and his descendants portion concludes, and we get to chapter 37. Jacob dwelt in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. This is the history of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a lad with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought an ill report of them to their father. So make a note, Joseph brought an ill report. Verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long robe with sleeves. Underline long robe with sleeves. It's not a colorful robe. I don't know where that tradition began. It's a robe with sleeves. What's the point of a robe with sleeves? What do you do if you're wearing a long sleeve shirt and you gotta get some dirty work done, like under a car or in a barn? You roll up your sleeves. Okay, so in the ancient world, if you're wearing sleeve vestiture, that's a sign of your position, your work, meaning you're not a manual labor. Because if you're doing manual labor, you're just going to go out with more practical garb. So Joseph, he brings an ill report to his dad, and he's also being given this robe with long sleeves. All this is all pointing to is that Joseph's being made an overseer of his brothers. His brothers are the ones supposed to be doing all the work, and Joseph is being placed in like the middle management position over them. And this is going to drive his brothers nuts because he's the younger brother who never has to do any of the hard labor, but he then goes and tattles to dad about when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Verse 4, but when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they only hated him more. He said to them, hear this dream which I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered round it and bowed down to my sheaf. His brothers said to him, are you indeed to reign over us, or are you indeed to have dominion over us? So they hated him yet more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brother and said, behold, I have dreamed another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Just make a note, Joseph has 2 dreams. He dreams the same thing twice. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock of Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word again." So he sent him to the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. So this is another example of Joseph getting special treatment. Another example that he's clearly in some oversight position, not having to do the difficult labor himself. And a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, I beg of you, where they are pasturing the flock." And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him afar off, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and then we shall say that a wild beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, cast him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him." So Reuben is going to try to save Joseph. What's Reuben's motivation here? Well, he just got on his dad's naughty list, and so a lot of commentators think he's just doing this as an attempt to get back into his father's good graces. Not that he genuinely cares about Joseph. So he said this that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father. Verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore, and they took him and cast him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. This is going to be contrasted with Moses. Make a note to Exodus chapter 2, verse 15. Exodus chapter 2, verse 15. So this is a pit with no water in it. It should have been a well, but there is no water in it. Okay, so it's like the opposite of the wedding, opposite fertility. This is a kind of death that he's going to be entering into. Verse 25. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother in our own flesh." And his brothers heeded him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. So the Ishmaelites and the Midianites, these are, how would you say? They'd be step siblings originally. So Midian was the descendant. He's the son of Abraham from Abraham's third wife. Ishmael is the son of Hagar and Abraham. These two people form one people together, right? And so in the Old Testament, you get references to Ishmaelites and Midianites, and it's an interchangeable term because they've essentially become one people. Yeah.
So this is, and so Judah selling his brother. So you know how like other stories about like in literature, it's always like the Jews are really rich or like they do anything to get their hands on money. Is that
that's
like,
in Charles Dickens.
Well, also in like Ivanhoe and all that stuff. So is that like basis here or no?
No.
Okay.
No, that's not what's going on here. Actually, what's going on here is that Judah, by selling Joseph into Egypt, is actually inadvertently saving the whole family. I mean, it's really Joseph who's saving the family, but Judah, God is going to take what Judah's done and bring good out of the evil. And that's the real point of the whole story. It was empty. Where do we leave? Verse 29. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The lad is gone, and I, where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and killed a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the long robe with sleeves and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. See now whether it is your son's robe or not." So Jacob, the trickster, who initially tricked his own dad by wearing someone else's clothes in his dad's old age, he in his old age is now getting tricked by his sons and being deceived with someone's clothes. Verse 33, and he recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. Chapter 38, we get the story of Judah and Tamar. And just highlight this section. This is part of the genealogy of Jesus. And Matthew, in his gospel, doesn't hide this genealogy of Jesus. In fact, the goal is by the time we get to the Old Testament and you read through the genealogy of Jesus in the Gospels, you should be able to recognize each name and understand its significance in the buildup of salvation history. So it happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned into a certain Adulamite, whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. He married her and went into her, and she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Again she conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. She was in Chezib when she bore him, and Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother." What's going on here is that in the ancient world, if you make it to 50 years old, you're lucky. So typically, you are going to get married when you're a guy around, let's say, 18, maybe 17. And then for the female, it's going to be married 15. Okay? And by the time you get married and you're 18, you do the math. If you're the firstborn son and your dad was the firstborn son, he's 36. He might have a decade left before he dies. So you then have to really step into adulthood at that point. Yeah, Ashton. Sure. So you have to step into adulthood at that point and be ready to provide for your family. And then when the time comes and the dad dies, women typically live longer. The firstborn son was your surety. It was like your insurance. That you would have a roof to live in. You would have someone tending to the flocks and bringing in the food, and so on and so forth.
So the dad lived with his sons, and his sons were.
Yes, you joined as one household. Okay, like our American notion of an American dream that you get hitched and you go in your own house and you get as far away from your parents as possible. That's only done because we're incredibly wealthy. All right, but back in the ancient world, you don't have you have no industrial revolutions. Society is agrarian.
Well, they don't have nursing homes.
They also don't have nursing homes because they're not wealthy enough to just have, everyone needs to be working to make food and provide for the means of living. But because we're able to produce food in mass and a lot of goods in mass, people can do things other than farm. So hence all the variety of jobs that are available that people do to justify their existences. But that's not the case in the ancient world. All right, so in the ancient world, if you're married and then your son if you get married and then your husband's dead and you are left with no heirs, that is the plight of the widow. So you often hear the plight of widows and orphans in the Old Testament. The reason is because there's no social structure to take care of them, except for this rule that Judah's referencing to with Onan. It's where the brother, the next brother, takes on the wife. They have a kid, and that son, the first son that they conceive together, is technically going to be legally the deceased father's son. All right, so is dead. Illustrate this. All right, so is married to Tamar. Is now dead, and so Onan is now married to Tamar. Now, when they have a kid together, technically this child, legally speaking, is going to be heir's descendant, because the child that's going to be conceived from their marriage is going to have the responsibility that Er would have had, which would be to take care of his mother and be the economic security and well-being for the family. And Onan doesn't like that, because Onan is basically going to have to raise someone who's legally, contractually Er's child and not get any of the credit for that. He doesn't want to do that. Where are we now? Verse 8. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of the brother-in-law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother." You're doing your brother's job of completing the family tree. Verse 9. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So he went in to his brother's wife. He spilled the semen on the ground, lest he should give offspring to his brother. And what he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, and he slew him also. All right, and that's the sin of onanism. It's like one of the biblical foundations for why contraception is a sin. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my son, grows up, for he feared that he would die, like his brothers." So Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. So Judah says, "You know what? Just go back home, live with your dad. I don't know why my sons are dying, but you seem to be the common factor here. See ya. And I'll send you my next son, Shelah, to complete this contractual obligation here. But he's also still a kid, so wait for him to grow up before we do that. And I'm also never going to send you because people just seem to die around you." So verse 12. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. And when Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, he and his friend Hira, the Adulamite. And when Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep," she put off her widow's garments and put on a veil, wrapping herself, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, for she had covered her face. He went over to her at the roadside and said, "Come, let me come in to you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give me that you may come in to me?" He answered, "I will send you a kid from the flock." And she said, "Will you give me a pledge till you send it?" He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet and your cord, and your staff that is in your hand." So he gave them to her, and it went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose and went away, and taking off her veil, she put on the garments of her widowhood. Then Judah sent the kid by his friend to the Adulamite to receive the pledge from the woman's hand. He could not find her, and he asked the men of the place, "Where is the harlot who is at Enaim by the wayside?" And they said, "No harlot has been here." So he returned to Judah and said, "I have not found her." And also the men of the place said, "No harlot has been here." And Judah replied, "Let her keep the things as her own, lest we be laughed at. You see, I sent this kid, and you could not find her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law has played the harlot, and moreover, she is with child by harlotry. And Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. So because now Tamar, who's supposed to be part of this family, who is part of his family by marriage, she's now being a harlot, which is a disgraceful thing to do. Didn't Judah just hire a harlot? Wouldn't that be just yes, that's also true. The Bible's not saying what Judah did is okay, but his family is insulted now. All right, it's tarnished by what Tamar has done. All right, because Tamar's next child was supposed to be Judah's legal, grandson, the heir. Instead, it's just going to be Judah's son instead of his grandson. Yes.
Well, that's what I'm gonna say. How come Judah doesn't have repercussions for sinning with the harlot?
Who says he doesn't?
It just seems like he doesn't.
Well, let's read and find out. So, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Moreover, she is a child with harlotry. Let her be burned. Verse 25. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. And she said, mark, I beg you, whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff. Then Judah acknowledged them and said, she is more righteous than I, inasmuch as I did not give her to my son Shelah. And he did not lie with her again. When the time for her delivery came, there were twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and bound on his hand a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out. And she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward, his brother came out with the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah. So highlight Perez. Perez is part of the genealogy of King David and the genealogy of Christ. And we'll conclude there for the day, and we'll return to Joseph in Egypt tomorrow.